Okay, hello everyone. First of all, welcome to the Winspiration platform series number 4. Today, it's my privilege to host our iconic panelists out here, Marykay, Kimberly, Shalaka, Latheef, and Debasish and Altaf, and you'll get to hear more about their backgrounds and their introductions. Now, our panelists have won accolades for their achievements. They're recognized leaders in the world of business, and they've been deeply involved in also giving back through mentoring, through community services, and involvement in social causes. Now, be it success mantras or life lessons or whatever gave them the edge to win and continue innovating, we will hear it directly from our thought leaders. So without any further delay, let's get started with a quick round of introductions. Maybe I can go based on this screen with you, Altaf.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Thank you, Anil and HCL, for having me on this conversation with esteemed peers and leaders from across the company. So my background, I'm Altaf Rupani. I head digital and emerging technologies at Guardian Life. Have been a technologist for most of my career, spent most of my career in media at NBC and News Corp and Dow Jones, and then made my switch more towards a non-media industry like life insurance and health insurance, if you will. It's been an interesting journey. Have always been focused about how to bring delightful, exceptional experiences to our consumers. And it's going to be an interesting conversation and journey from this point on. So,
excellent. Thank you, Altaf. Shalaka.
Thank you, Anil. Hello, everyone. My name is Shalaka Prabhune, and I lead the corporate IT team at Xperi Corporation. Before Xperi, I've worked for companies like Symantec and Veritas. Have spent most of my career in high-tech industries, actually. And just last couple of years, got a chance to see the media world at TiVo and Xperi, which is very different and quite entertaining, actually. And I'm really happy to be part of this panel today. Really looking forward to a great conversation.
Thank you, Shalaka. Marykay, over to you.
Well, thank you. Hi, I'm Marykay Wells. I am the CIO at Pearson Education. If those of you who haven't heard of Pearson, we are the world's largest learning company. And I, too, have spent most of my career in high tech prior to coming to Pearson. It's been a very interesting time across in the last few years around the digital transformation around learning and education, especially in the last year, to be kind of in the center of that digital transformation at Pearson. So thank you.
Thank you, Marykay. And with the new look, Debasish, over to you.
Thank you. I'm Debasish Mishra. I'm the CTO at the WNET Group, which is the public media company that services New York and New Jersey. So Channel 13 if you're from New York City. And I've spent the last 20 years in actually the for-profit space for a number of companies, Merck, Microsoft, Corning, and NBC Universal just before this, primarily as an architect. But I actually started my career as a lobbyist in the nonprofit sector. So, technology has just been kind of an interesting thing. And to come to WNET actually in the middle of a pandemic has been a fascinating experience. So happy to be here. Thank you so much, Anil and HCL.
My pleasure, Debasish. Latheef, over to you.
Thanks, Anil and HCL, for this opportunity. Super excited to be here and also to meet all these folks around the globe. I'm Latheef Syed, heading the data architecture and products around the AI, ML, artificial intelligence, and machine learning practice for Verizon. We recently moved into a CDAO organization. Earlier, we were with the CTO organization because as the data is moving in fast pace and all the needs that are coming in the AI, ML industry, this is a much needed practice that we have to establish. So Verizon is getting towards that. Been with Verizon for almost like 15 years now. But actually, I started my career back in the health industry, followed by banking, finance, and then into the telecom. spent a few years in Australia and New Zealand working for one of my clients, and then moved into US and never regretted since that point. So super excited and happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. I have a couple of comments to make on your 5G, but I'll wait. Kimberly, over to you.
Hey, good morning or afternoon, everyone. And I too am super excited to be here. I'm in my current role, I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales and Operations for our business division at UScellular Corporation. I'm in the telecom industry for longer than I care to admit, but a very long time. And I've stayed in this industry just because it's so dynamic and so changing and so impactful on both personal and our consumers and the businesses in all the segments, enterprise, SMB, and in public sector or government, and the impact that we have. I was at 25 years at Sprint, 10 years at Nextel as part of that, and then was literally making a change through the merger, was going to get out of telecom, got sucked back into telecom with USCC, this great company, and we're in a build, grow, and transform phase. So excited to be on this esteemed panel today and talk to everyone.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kimberly. And as everyone can hear and now see, what's really common is they're great achievers from different backgrounds, very rich background, and of course, no wonder awards and accolades have been pouring to all of them. So thank you very much once again to be with me on this platform. HCL recognizes and appreciates your contribution to business and technology and leadership. And so, if I can start with my first question that everyone is wanting to know, is really it's very clear all of you all are great business leaders. Really what everyone is wanting to know is what is a winner's mindset towards this journey, and what has really shaped this thinking and motivated you to achieve this kind of excellence. So Kimberly, maybe if I can start with you.
Sure. So the way that I think about a winner's mindset, and obviously you grow over time, because you don't know what you don't know when you're younger, but when you get to a certain age, you start to become more self-aware. But what I would say is it starts with your mind, and your mind is so incredibly powerful, and how you approach, how you approach something and you look at it and you say, wow, that seems like a big obstacle. Or do you say something in the form of, that's a big obstacle, but here's how we're going to go tackle it. And I think you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the winner's mindset is, look, I know coming into this, I'm going to face hurdles. It's not going to go as, according to plan, but I got to be able to pivot. But you develop that plan, and then you start executing that plan. And then when you have hurdles, you just move forward. And the way I think about it is, losing is not an option. There are different outcomes, and you pivot when you're not getting to the outcome you want, but you keep on going and you just don't give up. So it's that grit, determination. It's all of those intangible things that really mean a lot when you're faced with adversity. And that's what I think as a winner's mindset.
That's awesome. I really learned something. Get comfortable becoming uncomfortable. Thank you for that. Marykay, over to you for this.
No, I think that's a very good point. I mean, I think you need to focus, especially technology leadership need to really focus on first the results, but then also being able to be flexible and pivot if things change along the way. I think making sure that that if you think about winning and losing, a lot of people have the sports analogy, right? And what do winning teams look for? Well, they look for the best coaches and the best players. And I think you need to make sure that you adapt and you put the right people on the team in the right roles, and that you've created the relationships, have good communication, and are flexible on the outcomes. The outcomes should be what the business needs, not necessarily just getting the project or the technology initiative done, and what the customer needs. And I think that's the most important.
Excellent, Mary. That's a good different perspective there. Debasish, your point of views?
Sure. So I think Kim and Marykay said it well. That I think so much is about mindset. I think a lot is just that real will to win, right? Like, I was a scrawny brown kid that had zero athletic ability, and unfortunately, at that early age, I got used to losing. But when I was in high school, I joined the debate team, and I was able to win and really understand the thrill of winning, and so. From there, it's the innate desire to continue that rush that you get from winning. And so for me, it's always been about what can I improve? How do I get to that winner's circle? Whatever that goal is. It's a little bit about pivoting, and it's also just about the perseverance and the will to say, hey, this isn't working. I'm going to go now try something different to be able to address that obstacle that I ran into, because I'm so committed to that goal. And that's what it's been for me in any case.
Well, thank you, Debasish. Thrill. It's got to be thrilling. Absolutely. It's got to be something that you enjoy and it gives you a high. Latheef, your perspectives, please.
I'm pretty sure Kim, Marykay, and Debasish have summarized everything. Those are the salient features everybody has to have in terms of winning aspiration. I'm an avid tennis player. I play different opponents at different times. The biggest challenge you'll always face is how do you course correct yourself when you're thinking that you are behind the ball, right? And this is something we all have to think through, because there are a lot of unknowns out there. And the best thing is to take a step back, see what we are doing wrong, and then course correct it. To Kim's point, right? Losing is not an option, but there are different outcomes, and that will help you make you stronger and be in the right path. And that is something I have observed in many experiences in my life, personally as well as in professional life. But this is the fundamental, thought process we all have to take. Mindset, as Debasish said, and also losing is not an option, but at the same time, course corrected when you're feeling that you are not in the right path.
Excellent. Thank you, Latheef, for that. Shalaka?
Yeah. I think, as we said, the leaders before me have summarized a lot of great points. Just one or two additions that I would say is, one, you just need to know what winning looks like, right? What is the goal? You need to have the clarity of what are you really trying to get to. Other than that, obviously everyone said the same things, right? Focus, adapt to changes. I think winners thrive on challenges. That's how we really make sure that we can keep moving no matter what obstacles come in the way, right? So you just need to have that mindset where you're going to adapt, you're going to keep moving, and make sure you reach your goal no matter what. So that's what it looks like to me.
Sure. Thank you, Shalaka. You beautifully summarized clarity of goals and thriving with these challenges. Altaf, something different from you on this?
Yeah, everybody has kind of shared so much that I can relate to. I'd hate to say that we're winners and we've never lost kind of thing, but I will say my learnings over the course of my career, if I were to distill it down, I would say it's basically clarity, attitude, and intent, right? And so for winning, you got to be clear what your goal is, right? So you got to be you need to understand what's your vision, what's the goal looking like, and be clear and very focused on it. Often we get distracted on the ancillary things or the adjacencies, and you lose focus on the target, and that's when you end up short of it. The attitude and the intent, right? That is so important for you to have a winning mindset. You're going in with that positive attitude, and to the point that Kim, Marykay, and others made was, don't be afraid of failure. The fear of failure often doesn't let us get out of the blocks, right? So failure is not fatal, if you will, right? Failures are moments of learnings that will help you become better in the next journey. Now, I've had my share of failures. Trust me, I got a bag full of them, right? But what I've learned from them is, what am I not going to do the next time, and what am I going to do things differently? And then the one thing that I try to share with everybody who kind of seeks advice is you'll have a bunch of people who will tell you why it can't be done. Go find the people who are going to tell you how it can be done. Those are the people you want in your team, right? They are the ones who will share that winning attitude, the winning mindset with you, because they will always adapt, or they will find ways to succeed and take you to the end goal or the finish line. So I'll just share that piece of it. It's just my own personal learnings, but I think it helps.
Okay, so learning from failures. Absolutely, I agree. I heard Marykay talk about the sports analogy, the team players and the coaches. I think related to that then really is in a journey of success. There's always, we've all heard of mentors. So coaches really correlates into mentors. How, like, would you be able to share some things about mentors? How important are mentors, and how have they been in your success of your journey for leadership? Mary?
Sure. So, it's funny because actually, my father was a coach. So I would say, first of all, growing up, I learned a lot from the way he treated his team, the way he ran his team. And I think, there is a lot that you can learn from even in reminding yourself around how you really, drive success within a team. I recently read a book. It's called The Speed of Trust. And I don't know if anybody else on the panel has read the book, but it's interesting because I reflected on things where things have gone really well, when you have a high performing team, the culture is right, the execution's right, you're holding each other to account, there's a high level of trust, things happen fast. And then there's situations where people aren't actually pulling their weight or they're not meeting their commitments. And if you let that go, then it kind of leads into a different kind of team that's not necessarily as high performing as they could be. So I think team and culture, execution, holding teams to account, and the mentors that I've had throughout my career, I think have always instilled that level of coaching to me specifically, and but it did start with my dad.
Well, it can't get better than that, Mary. Kimberly, your inputs on the mentoring process and your personal mentors?
Yeah, I guess you can have official mentors, then sort of unofficial mentors, and then I always add on the advocates, which are not really mentors. They're the ones that are advocating for you when you're not around in those meetings. And so you need to develop the different relationships. I think mentors are important because they can give you, if you have that kind of trust and foundation, that feedback that you need to hear, even the feedback that you don't want to hear, like, hey, you could have handled this differently. And they give you the insights, and it's somebody to bounce ideas. And I also think that in a mentoring relationship, you have the mentor-mentee, but sometimes it changes. And what I learned over the years, when you first start off, it's like, oh, they're going to be all-knowing and they're going to tell me everything and their sage wisdom. And what I found is they wanted to learn from me as well. It was a great conduit in the organization, maybe more on the front line, depending upon who it was mentoring. And I've had, different, male, females, all of that in terms of the course of your career. And even when I mentor others, I always tell them, I'm going to learn from you and you're going to learn from me. But it's a great foundation of trust. I also learned early on from a mentor that there's no such thing as bad teams. It's only bad leaders. Mm-hmm. And when you really let that sink in, it's just taking like complete accountability for your actions. And, Mary, you mentioned it, like your culture and the team involvement and engagement, all of that. So I learned a lot from early on. And then the bigger thing was when you're asking yourself, like advocates, who's advocating for you? Not just your mentors, but the relationships that you're making across your organization, so that when you're not around and there's a promotion or an opportunity to lead some sort of a team or special project, somebody's advocating on your behalf. It's so important.
True. And particularly when organizations become larger, more complex, that too many stakeholders, you really need advocates in this whole process. I agree. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Latheef, it's very common in a Verizon world, at least I can correlate this comment of Kimberly, but your perspectives, please.
No, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't have to be an official channel to get mentoring, I would say. I mean, we do have mentors in every phase of life. I mean, we walk out to the park, we do see and observe we always get some good things that we learn. But obviously, from a life standpoint and from a professional work standpoint, we always lean on to certain leaders to understand how things can be done differently. I want to give a couple of examples. When I was in Australia working for a New Zealand bank, the VP of bank, Desiree Vakaria, basically came and said, no matter what we do in life, be kinder than necessary. I know this is Jim Barry quote from the best sayings, but we gotta be kinder than necessary at any point and every point in life, because that builds strong teams. Happy teams deliver, innovate, and this is something we always have to think through. And I always have used that, at least in many phases of my professional career, to inculcate that kind of a culture and help that grow. And I also have seen the reciprocation from that standpoint. So this is something I would say kudos to Desiree from my previous work. She has been phenomenal in this space. And then, within Verizon, we had a leader, Mahmoud El-Assir. He was leading by example, right? He was more into how do we know the teams, because every team has different strength. We got to bring all pieces together. Some are good, some are not so good, but we have to put pieces together and lead by example. And, I always, envision how he has tackled many problems, and at times also giving us the right notion in terms of what we have to do and solve for it as well. And by the way, he now moved to Google, so he's doing excellent there, and happy to know more, from him as we go along.
Absolutely, yes. I can relate to that name without a doubt. And it's a wonderful person, without a doubt. Shalaka, your perspective on the mentoring and advocacy?
Sure. So I think mentoring is something I'm really passionate about, and not just that I've not a personal level, professional level. I have participated in mentoring circles within the company, started few in the companies that I've been at. I also volunteer externally as a mentor. And I think it plays a huge role in our professional careers as well. This is something I wish I would have learned early on in my career and really actively seeked for mentors, because I think it's, again, to the point Kim made earlier, it's a two-way relationship, right? You learn a lot from the mentors, but at the same time, your naive perspectives, even in early on in stages, can give them a perspective that they might find interesting and be helpful in their growth as well. I think mentoring relationships can be lifelong, right? They're helpful in giving you guidance, just soundboards, providing feedback, right? Different things. Mentoring starts informally. I know my first mentor, if I have to look back now, obviously my mom, right? And things start early on when you don't realize it. Whether it was just picking your own college, making your own career choices. But the guidance that I always got was you have to be self-dependent. You have to make sure that you are going to be able to stand on yourself, right? That's the first teaching that my mom had ever taught me, right? So those are the things that really build your career. I was very lucky to have formal mentors, and my previous kind of coaches, managers who have been part of my life and my journey, who are still to date my mentors. And I do seek their advice when I have questions, doubts, even now. So I think it's a very important aspect of a professional growth.
Sure. So I would correlate to that absolutely, that mentoring is not just at one phase of your life. It really could be, quote unquote, lifelong. And that just demonstrates the whole relationship between a mentor and a mentee. Debasish, your perspectives, please.
Sure. I think folks have said a lot of really good stuff. I have a saying with my teams is that, good architects create and great architects steal. And so, I always look for people who have unique insights, especially, the roles that I've played have always been about creating really, really big change. And changes is the technology part of that is always the easiest part. It's really the people that's the hardest. And so I've always looked for mentors that, had some unique insights into people and that would make that easier. And so the best, insight I ever got was that, people will go along with just about anything as long as they have their day in court, which is to say, as long as people have an opportunity to be heard, to be able to make their point, to feel that they were listened to with sincerity, then I think you can get them, even if you go in a different direction, as long as you make them feel heard and acknowledged, that you can make the change. And that's really sat with me for a long time. But I do believe, and Kim and Shalaka had mentioned this, peer mentoring, I think, is extremely powerful. I actually, in my side business, I put job seekers together in peer mentoring groups, because they're able to draw on each other's experience as they go through what is essentially a difficult process. And there's a lot of success that comes out of that, and I think that's powerful for any organization to put together.
Absolutely. Care mentoring is absolutely a very interesting perspective that you just brought in. Altaf, if you would like to add to this, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think pretty much everybody has covered, I think, in terms of, what mentoring meant to them. And I've been lucky myself that I met the right people at the right junctures in my life that guided me in the right direction. And I have this deep urge of now giving back, right? So when I do talk to my formalized mentees, what I try to do differently, as I have learned from the people who have helped me, it's not about preaching. It's not about, being the teacher in the conversation. It's about being the conversation there, right? Being that other party in the conversation, because often when there is self-doubt or there is confusion or there is this uncertainty, just talking to somebody else and just like Debasish said, drawing from their experience or learning from their insights can help give you clarity of what you want to achieve. It may not be like for like, but it will help you do that. I just want to take a second and talk about the teams piece of it, which we talked about a little earlier. I think it's very important as you grow, as I have grown in my career, that you win as the team. There are no single superstars, right? I mean, and if you believe that you are, and if you see a lot in your organization, those are the ones you want to address very quickly, right? Because it cannot be for personal glory. It has to be for teamwork. So I like to share this with my teams at work, is that we win as a team, we lose as a team, and understand that it's not about you getting an A on your report card. The team's got to get an A, right? And it's important because once you create that trust, and the ability that people can trust you and they can depend on you, they will reciprocate that. That's a very important step if you want to be a successful winning person, if you will. So, I think we've covered a lot on this particular topic, but I think mentoring is as much as getting as it is taking, kind of thing, right? So, or giving, if you will. Right? So.
Well, Altaf, absolutely. And since you're on the, ended with the giving part, I think I'm almost connecting the next question here about, because this is also a platform for us to advocate a lot of the learnings and experiences for budding leaders that they can look up to in this whole journey of theirs. So really the question is, if you could go back in time, what do you typically think are these common mistakes that are made in the early years of, building up of leadership, and that affects growth trajectories? And kind of what advice could you give folks who are in that journey in the early years?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because if I had to go back in time and kind of, reset a few things, I don't know what the outcome would have been. I'm guessing it would have been a positive outcome, but a couple of things, like I alluded to the fact, as you are early on in your career, you're trying to make a name for yourself and stand out, right? That's a natural human tendency. And that kind of gives birth to your individualism, right? You try to make it everything about yourself and like, I'm smarter and so on and so forth. If you do that too long, I think it can be a little detrimental, because you've got to learn to, the moment you realize the fact that you need other people of equal or same caliber who are going to make you successful, and you will make them successful. I think that's an important piece, that people make these mistakes early on. The second piece is, you've always heard this cliche, if you want to see it done right, do it yourself. And that can be very, bad for you as you go up, because then you will not learn to delegate and create that trust and create those emerging leaders along with you, right? So I think the sooner we learn, so if I were to look back, had I, for me, that creating that trust with the team early on would have been better, and I would have had a different trajectory kind of thing, and this ability to delegate, right? Because otherwise you create this burden on yourself, and then often you're going to get discouraged with it. So I would say going back in time, those are the two things you should keep an eye on.
Got it. Marykay, from your perspective, going back in time, challenges and things that you would like to advise budding leaders?
So if you think, I think, it's all about, as we said before, not dedicating enough time to people, making sure people are coming along with you. I think one of the things that if I reflect back, it's really focusing more on the result than actually, how do you bring people along? How do you make sure that you're leveraging everybody to get there in the right way? I think another thing is making sure that you're dealing with conflict. I think, a lot of times that slows things down when you don't directly deal with conflict. And you can deal with conflict in a supporting and transparent way. And then I would say the last thing is, if I reflect back, is spending too much time doing analysis and planning and trying to get something perfect, rather than trying to just take off and then iterating as you go along. I think those are all things that learning through time can help improve the overall outcome and success in your growth trajectory.
Sure. Excellent. Kimberly, from your perspective, looking back in the rearview mirror, what would you change and what would you advise? These typical common mistakes to be avoided for budding leaders?
Sure. And I just want to make it clear, I know we're talking about all the greatness and all these good things. Every single one of us on here, at least I'll speak for myself, I have stumbled and fumbled and bumbled throughout my career, and then I learn from it, and then I try to emulate what I see, and as you get older, you become more aware. So these are always interesting conversations, but don't think that this is perfection, because I'll be a work in progress probably up until the day I'm on my deathbed. I just want to make that clear. But as long as you're striving to continue to do better. But I'd say two things as I was just listening, because I think these are great answers that the panelists are giving. And one is, I think starting off, I was in especially early on, win-lose. I was playing to win. And it was at the expense at times of other people losing, because I didn't understand about the win-win and really what that meant. And so as you seek to understand about what's important to, whether it's a negotiation with a client, or even in your personal life, how you're trying to get your point across, if it's something you want even today and you're negotiating all the time, it's how do you get to a win-win balance? And I had to learn that over time. And that was just through trial and error, through feedback, through watching others, so that you can get to good outcomes that people are, everybody's, you may not be 100% happy. And if you are, that's okay, maybe that wasn't a good negotiation, but it's more about how it's, people walk away going, okay, yeah, I feel good about this, and everybody feels good about it. So that's probably one. And then the second thing is just making sure that people understand, you're in a cross-functional matrixed organization. We all are. You very rarely own it all. And even if you do, I think early on I would make assumptions that people understood what I was trying to do and why, and what their role was. I think I always say this communication of 7 times 7 ways about hey, here's what we're trying to do, and here's why it's important in your role, and why your role is so important to why we need to go do this. And it becomes more of a really an art and a practice, but I probably didn't do that very well early on, but learned throughout the years, because then it goes back to what the team, this whole panel is saying about collaboration and feeling a part of something bigger than oneself, and understanding how you play in that role and those outcomes, and giving credit back to everybody that was involved. So those are probably the two things that come to mind that I wish I had started early on. I do now, but I didn't early on.
Excellent points, Kimberly, and thank you for sharing that. Latheef, you talked about happy teams, I know, but how can we make it happier much earlier for this whole journey for leadership?
Absolutely. That is the toughest challenge every leader has in the organization. The happy teams come when you encourage at times when they are in low point, and you basically, give them the right mentorship and guidelines. I mean, the one fundamental culture we all have to think through is fail fast and recover quick. Going back to Marykay's point, if you have a long tail of analysis and paralysis and you think things will work out eventually, it's not going to happen. So the mentality of bringing in fail fast, recover, and we will encourage you to get on to a next initiative and whatnot, that needs to be established. Not having that mindset, not having that culture, not only hinders the teams, it brings down the motivation for the broader teams, right? As Kim mentioned, it's a cross-matrix organization. I mean, if you go low on one end, the other end also suffers. So this is something we all have to collectively think through. And at least in my career, I have made sure I encourage the teams. If they fail, we do encourage it to move on to the next and see what can be done. And happy teams are basically, based on how we, pair up. I mean, we have a concept, something called, do you have a work friend, right? Oftentimes we have friends outside of work, but not within your workspace. So building that kind of relationship is very critical. So once you know more about the individual, more about the teams, you can navigate the challenges they have and also help them out. And this basically builds trust. And this brings everything from that happiness standpoint. And basically this becomes like a recipe for the teams to succeed. And last but not least, I don't want to belabor the point here, it's a collective effort. It's not like, things are done this way versus the other way. And I know Kim referred to something, people do not quit organizations, people quit bosses. So this is very important that we all have to think through. And I have learned it personally in my life. And I would say making a happiest team is going back to that encouragement when they are at low point and build it from there.
Excellent, excellent. Point noted. Shalaka, your perspectives on this, please.
Yeah, sure. I think in early stages of your career, you're just getting a hang of things, and sometimes you're hesitant to take risks, try different things, right? But you trying new things and also giving the teams opportunities to try different things, to the point that some of the leaders made earlier, right? Fail fast. It's okay to fail. Having that safe environment where you encourage people and say, hey, you know what? You tried something new. It's okay, it didn't work out, but what is the learning and how can we adjust and make things better for the team, for everyone in the team? One additional point that I want to make sure is talk about feedback. That's something that I have learned myself. Feedback is always a gift. And you have to learn to see how you take that feedback in a very constructive way. Take feedback and give feedback constantly. I think happy teams are about making sure you can have an open conversation with others, be transparent, right? Because when you can have candid conversations, you can agree to disagree on some things, but that's how you really are able to collaborate and move forward. So that's the other piece about just making sure that you can take feedback constructively and use that for your own development and the team's development. So those are the couple of things that I would add to this.
Excellent. Candidness in the feedback giving as well as feedback taking. Point taken. Altaf?
I think I went already. I think Debasish is the one that.
Oh, sorry, Debasish, please.
Yeah, we get confused a lot because of the NBC thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I double down on what Kim had talked about in terms of communicating. I think, many organizations I've been a part of probably don't do enough communicating. And you really want to drive clarity on both what you're trying to get after, what is the accountability that you're expecting from folks. And I think the other thing is when you're just starting out, there's like this pressure as a leader to always be right or to always have the answers, right? Your team might expect you to have the answer. And I think it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, right? We're going to figure it out. And I think in saying, hey, I don't know. We don't know the answers. We know we're going to make mistakes. And once we figure that out, we'll work around it. Gives people the space to be able to make the mistakes, to take the risks, and I think it helps a lot when you're over communicating in that way, to build the trust that you need to be able to really make that team perform.
Got it, Debasish. Thank you very much for that. And based on that, I kind of thinking a little changing tracks out here. I wanted to touch upon a big issue which all leaders face today and are taking ownership of, and that's the issue on inclusivity. So I wanted to get your perspectives on how, as leaders, are you really helping and encouraging the inclusivity in your organizations or your past organizations? And typically, what's the common challenges associated towards dealing with this? Kimberly, could you address that first, please?
Sure. Well, so the first thing is leading by example. I think it has to start with the leadership. You can't, and by the way, you can't be a talking head and you say it and it's the buzzword, and then you take a look at your own team or your own actions and it doesn't reflect what you're saying. So I think it starts there, and placing that importance. And I will say at USCC, like it's our mission. There's training behind it. There's employee resource groups behind it. And there was at my former company as well, but even more so here. I think the challenge that we get caught up in is that we get diversity and inclusion sort of mixed up, and they're different. The diversity is like, what is the makeup of the team, the ethnicity, the race, the backgrounds, the experiences, and that they're different. And then the inclusion component to it is really what you do with that, but what you do with those backgrounds and how you bring them together, and how you value. It's like an element of inclusion and value and respect and difference of opinions, and that you encourage the difference of opinions, and how it manifests itself. I don't profess to be perfect, and we haven't gotten to perfection. We are literally on this journey and we're working towards it. That's where the training and the first thing about like being just aware, I think, and that's why the training is so important. But it's the promoting an environment where the opinions are welcome, that you encourage healthy conflict, meaning because you don't want the same thing. I think you get to better outcomes, better decisions, the way you support your customers. Like the benefits far outweigh, and the reasons why we should be doing this. And so I try to promote this environment of bringing different people in the organizations on different tasks, asking a lot of questions, letting that conflict, kind of play itself out, but in a very respectful manner, of course, and then making sure people are heard. But it's definitely this journey that we're on, and it's just driving that awareness. But it starts with my team and the actions that I'm taking, because, it's the shadow that I cast. And it's not what I say, but it's even more important about what I do.
Absolutely. Practicing what you preach every day of your life, starting from within home. Marykay, your perspective.
Yeah, I think those points that Kim made are right on. I mean, I think everybody, we have a D&I council, and obviously you can participate on a D&I council, but everybody's watching to see if you're actually doing what you say you're going to do. So it's really demonstrating what you believe in every day. We've created a employee resource group around women in technology. And one of the things that they did is they came up with an inclusive hiring guide, right? And those are things like, things to look for. How do you perform an interview? How do you bring different people into your team? So it is about diversity, so that we can demonstrate inclusion. So, it's very interesting, because if you don't, as a leader, support and ask the questions and challenge and make sure that when you're coming up with a new initiative, you look for people across the organization with different perspectives to solve your problem. We've started things called fusion teams, where it's different locations, different countries, different disciplines, different levels in the organization to really drive results across the team. And I think if you don't demonstrate support and take an active role as a leader, you're not going. It's not going to work, right? And you're not going to be able to really get that commitment through the organization.
Absolutely. So demonstrating it every day of your life, I guess. Debasish?
Yeah, I think, because we're in the technology industry, I think we tend to see that, it's not as diverse, equitable, or inclusive as we'd like. So, I do think it's a very personal commitment to ensuring that it starts to get that way, right? So, for me, that looked like, talking to my recruiters and making sure that, we were going to, historically Black colleges and universities to make sure that they were aware of the opportunities that we had, right? It was really looking at who my workforce was and ensuring that we had a strength of diversity in both the leadership as well as the staff. And then, surprisingly, and it's unfortunate that it would happen, but you would run into circumstances where you would see people acting in ways that were, at best maybe ignorant, and making comments that that had real impact on folks, and you really had to be able to be willing to stand up and step up in those situations and call it out. I think that part can be a little scary, right? Because especially if you're in an organization that is culturally attuned towards certain attitudes, and it's okay, and you're going to kind of stick out, and it's going to be uncomfortable. To be able to step up into that and to call it out is incredibly important to be able to make the change.
Sure, absolutely, Debasish. Latheef, some of the challenges also associated with this whole inclusivity, and how are you as a leader addressing it?
Yeah, this is a very sensitive and a very critical topic, I would say. It all starts with the leader. Leaders often have this hippo syndrome, like, highly paid person opinion, and that basically pushes teams out. Having that inclusivity by bringing teams, hearing them out, and when you're walking into a room, make sure that you're leaving your designation at the door. In that way, you are taking that, kind of, the friction that you have that can hinder the teams and whatnot. So the challenges are same, regardless of which vertical we come in from. I mean, Verizon is no different. But what we are seeing the last 2 years is the inclusivity, as we are bringing in, as Debasish mentioned, right, hearing it more. Diversifying is one, but bringing all the teams together and having that, servant leadership mentality takes a longer turn to solve these issues that we have. So my take is, definitely it starts with the leader and hearing the team out, spending more time, not like, I'm in a C-suite, you cannot come to me during this time and whatnot. Those things really hinder. So regardless of which team, where they're located, we have to have an open door, hear them out, give positive feedback, and take things along from that aspect.
Point taken, Latheef. Shalaka, your perspective on inclusivity?
Sure. I have to say, Kim stole the words out of my mouth when she said lead by example, because absolutely that's the biggest thing in this case, right? You have to be able to practice what you think, what you say, and be a role model for the team members and say what works, what doesn't. I think also agree with everything that Marykay, Debasish, and Latheef said, making sure that you're giving the teams opportunities, making sure it's fair, having those conversations. And it's not just about, doing it in an ERG or employee resource group, or just on one specific day when it's celebrating inclusion or things like that, right? It's about making sure it's part of your life, part of your day-to-day practices. I think the other thing as leaders, we have to be able to challenge if we see others who are not doing the same thing, right? Because the culture really spreads, especially if there are other leaders and we see that. We have the ability to be vocal about it, talk about it. And sometimes it may be unintentional, but just making sure that we are able to address if we see any diversion from the company culture being really inclusive, we have to call those out. That's also the other responsibility as leaders we do have.
Excellent. So culture is a very important point that we need to be driving in our organizations and ourselves, of course. Altaf, you have any different perspective on this?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I think everybody has shared what most of us have been doing. I think agree. It starts from the top. It starts with leadership behaviors. What you do is what your teams will emulate doing, right? Because they will consider that to be the right thing to do. I wanted to just connect the two things together: the happy teams and this inclusion and diversity piece of it. One of the key reasons why teams will be happy and high performing is that they feel respected, they feel included, and they feel heard, right? And if we are not creating that kind of a culture or an environment, then you're going to have teams that perform, but they won't necessarily be happy, and you'll always be a dollar short or a day late on their deliverables, kind of thing, right? So I think Kim mentioned it at the start, which was what's the difference between diversity and inclusion. The way we try to explain it to our leaders or our budding leaders is diversity is you're invited to the party. Inclusion is you're actually asked to dance, right? So the whole point being is that, you could have a diverse organization and you could be checking off the box saying, I have the right ethnicities, I have the right gender breakout, and, I've done my piece. That's where you started, right? I mean, essentially getting people included, giving them an opportunity, empowering them will create that culture which is sustainable. And, as an organization, Guardian has done quite a bit in a very short period of time. Not that we didn't have a good plan before, but we've just doubled down and made ourselves so conscious of the fact, whether it's our recruiting, whether we, how are we building teams, how are we getting people into, decision-making roles. We are trying to create that diverse and inclusive mindset, because then it starts to permeate and starts to self-replicate within the organization. So this is not something that we should all consider as a fad that it's good for 2020, 2021. It is something that has to be systemic and sustainable, because it's when you have these listening sessions and you hear from people who feel orphaned or ignored or disenfranchised, it's hard to hear about their experiences, because they've been deeply impacted by how people have consciously or unconsciously treated them, and we as leaders have to be held accountable for that, right, and hold people accountable. So
absolutely, and I think this is definitely gaining momentum to such a degree where we are seeing the benefits of it, and we all are clearly believers and recognizing that it's not a company culture or some boardroom which has to decide it. It is really the companies, these organizations are all of us. We need to drive it, and thereby connecting the dots of we have to be practicing it and not just preaching it, living it, as Marykay said. I know we're short of time, so I probably will combine a couple of questions. And I think the first one really, or the last two, here was I wanted to connect two elements in one, and that is, looking at, we just covered inclusivity as one aspect or challenge, but really looking at your own careers, the unique challenges that each of you have faced in your journeys, but more importantly, how did you overcome them? And then people who may have played a role in helping you provide the support in this course of journey and overcoming those unique challenges. I wanted to start with you, Marykay.
Well, I mean, I think we've all faced a lot of challenges, and I'm going to say a few that I don't think are unique. I think, when I reflect back, it's very easy to, as a female engineer in an organization, before I was even a manager, really be the one that was asked to take notes. I didn't, when we had a staff meeting, I used to sit on the back wall rather than at the table. These are all things that you have to overcome, and you have to really be mindful to say, if you want to be reflected as a serious technology leader or leader within, you can't be the one that really plays the mother role all the time in an organization. And I think, those are the things that I started to politely say, well, why don't we take a turn doing this, taking notes or actions in a meeting, and really not playing that role, so that I was envisioned more as a leader rather than, somebody that was there just to, do all the nonsense that no one else wanted to do. And I think a lot of people would have those challenges, and it's all perception. But I wanted to be perceived as a leader and a good technologist within a team. And once I overcame that, and then I gained confidence. And I think that I took risks, and I bid for roles that were, I wasn't necessarily 100% qualified for. And those are all things that I'm sure a lot of others on the call can reflect upon. But I think that was my biggest challenge.
Excellent. Marykay, excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Kimberly, your perspective on any unique challenges faced, and how did you overcome, and people who helped you overcome?
Yeah, well, and I agree. Marykay, you said you're absolutely right. I mean, we face challenges personally and professionally all the time, and I think it's just how you react to those challenges, because it doesn't matter what position you are in life, personally and professionally, you're going to face challenges whether it's medical induced or it's at work, whatever the case may be. It's interesting that you, and I don't want to get on the woman bandwagon, but the truth is, when I started off in telecom, 25 years ago, and I was in a very male dominated industry. And so I had frustrations, but what I would tell you is, and it would be like, well, who's this pretty little lady that's going to tell me about two-way radios, things like that. And, but what I would do is turn it around and literally just launch into it. So I commanded respect, and I just never used it as an excuse. I just won't do it. And so, because there's different types of challenges that come your way, regardless of what that challenge is. And so I just never used it as an excuse. I just found a way to work through it. Even, Marykay, you mentioned being inexperienced for roles, and there were roles that I got, and I was like, holy heck, how did I get that role? Oh my word. And then, you just learn to, like everything else you do, you get your strategy and your execution and your approach, and you move on. And there were other roles that I thought, gosh, I should have gotten that role and I didn't. And then you get the feedback, and then you figure out, like, is it more visibility? Like, what do I need to do? And so you just work through it. In terms of people that have helped you, it's, your family can help you. You need a soundboard. My husband clearly has heard the best of the sessions over a glass of wine here and there, or 2 or 3 or whatever that case may be. But then you kind of put your big girl or big boy pants on again, and you just go at it, because it's just life, and life can be messy, and there's no such thing as perfection. And so you just figure out a way. What is it that you're trying to do, and that goal or that challenge that's in front of you, and you just don't use it as an excuse. It kind of goes back to the winner's mindset, like how you view and how you approach life in general.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to keep the wine, or 2 or 3 of them always. I'll remember that. Latheef, your perspective on these unique challenges.
I mean, Kim and Marykay pretty much, elaborated on what we all go through in our careers and also in the day-to-day life. I would say, there is no easy way, regardless of which position you are in or which skill you own. There has always been challenges. And the challenges is always on the softer side of the skills, not on the technical side of the skills. What I mean by that is, I have walked out on a couple of, incidents where I didn't like the way we got getting treated, or, even the inclusivity part was not there. And this was something that, ingrained into my, DNA, I would say. No matter what in future, we have to make this as a cultural, behavior that we include, bring the people together and have everything be heard, just, somebody saying at a certain, VP or director level, and that doesn't trickle down to the working level members, that alienates people, right? So that is something I have seen in my life. So having a right transparency mindset, and having that, taking one day at a time, And going back to Kim's point, if you have a soundboard to say to somebody else, that is the best thing you can have, so that you get the feedback, and the next day you are back in the game and start doing things differently. And there is no easy way. I'm telling you, even today, next week, next month, next year, we will still have those challenges across the board. And how do we pursue it? How do we take care and go from there is what going to be a big differentiator for.
Understood. The attitude to challenges, not just in the past, going forward too.
Yeah.
Shalaka, your perspective on the challenges and people's support that you have received.
Sure. So again, agree with a lot of things that Kim, Mary, and Latheef said, right? Jumping onto the women in tech kind of bandwagon there. A lot of those challenges are true. Now we are at a state where many organizations have a lot of awareness and are really actively working to make sure that they have the right support for all the groups and different diversities working in the company, right? But that's still evolving. And early on in career, for example, right, like when I was probably pregnant with my first kid, it's always like, oh, maybe you can sit out, or we are going to have a late night meeting. Understand if you can't participate. I think it's about making sure that the inclusion really comes at that point where you're allowing team members to really make their own choices and really making sure that they can feel they have a voice at that table, right? So those kinds of things. The other side of extremes as well, right? To Kim's point earlier, when you feel like, oh, I suddenly have this opportunity after my maternity leave, I come back to work and I'm just trying to get back into the swing of things. And someone really presented me with a great opportunity, a step up and a big role. And you're like, I know you can do this. You just have to go for it. The trust that person showed in me really boosted my confidence 10 times. And I really was ready to do it no matter what happened, no matter if I failed, but I wanted to give it an honest try. And it did work, right? It did work. So having those kind of mentors, people who see you, support you, also learning from that, you can be that person who can really support and provide others that ground to move and develop in their own careers is really important. So I think those are some of my own challenges and how I've learned from those.
Well, thank you, Shalaka, for sharing that. Altaf?
Yeah, no, and very, very insightful. And we've heard this through our listening sessions, but here again, it brings it to the forefront. I'll just take a minute to talk about, I didn't personally experience these challenges, but what Latheef said, the challenges that, are generally on the softer side, not on the harder side, which is technology, or, you have confidence in your skills. For me, I still remember that day. I had just moved from like an individual contributor into more of a leadership role. And now you start to feel the burden of responsibility of people who depend on you, your team, and, their career planning and where they're heading and so on and so forth. And, there was this time when I had to make a business decision and let a couple of people go, right? I couldn't sleep the night before. I was a wreck because all the emotions that person would have felt, I was starting to, it was getting projected to me, and I was anticipating all of that. And it was particularly hard for me as a young leader, but that's where my mentors helped me. And I wanted to connect those two topics because that phone call to that mentor or the person who I trusted in the morning, he helped me think through how you want to have the conversations. Why are you having the conversations? He taught me, or he reminded me that project that compassion, that empathy, that respect, that dignity, but yet you have to make a business decision, and that is your responsibility. And it was an incredible learning moment. It was a challenge that stayed with me for a long time. But every time I have to go back and have those kind of conversations, I rewind the tape and I replay that morning conversation in my head, because that moment I learned so much, and it has just served me well. So, often it's not the hard topics that you remember. It's just these soft, people-oriented topics that are the bigger challenges. And whether it's gender discrimination, whether it's not including people, or just making a hard business decision.
Altaf, thanks for that. I think you beautifully connected this to the mentoring and the soundboarding points. Debasish, your final word.
Sure. I think I have to echo Latheef and Altaf on how much this is really about people at the end of the day, more so than technology. As an architect, I'm almost never empowered to actually do anything. It's an influencer, predominantly an influencer role. So no, NBC being no exception, and Altaf was one of the people that I had to influence. And not to put him on the spot, but I think the understanding that it's about people in the relationship and building trust. I think where I looked for support was actually Altaf, right? I would go to Altaf and say, look, you've got your set of objectives, and here's the set of objectives that I've got, and how do we help each other achieve something that's mutual, and having the conversation and just being open enough to receive the support. And I have to say, Altaf was a great partner. He was very clear about what he couldn't do, but he was also really good about offering what he could do, because I think at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. We're trying to get to the same place, and we all understand that. And it's just a matter of, can we build the relationship? Can we build the trust with each other so that we can help each other get to that end goal? So, I think just recognizing that out the gate is the important part, that you can ask the people for help that you're actually supposed to influence.
Absolutely, Debasish. Thank you so much for that. And I know we have run out of time, but I do want to say a couple of things. We're going to be having a lot of questions coming on these topics based on all your responses. What we will do is take the ownership of having those questions of the audience passed on to you for your comments and respond back to them. So that's one big accountability we will take on for all these topics, which we clearly know are important. And, based on your responses, it makes it even more important. And I think all I can say for now is nothing more importantly than a big thank you. It's been a great learning for me personally. I am going to be hearing this whole thing all over again, such that I absorb every element of what was spoken, reflect back for myself. It'll be a great reflection and learning for everyone that hears it. And so thank you very much for sharing your personal experiences, your learnings, a lot of failures also, admitting it, some wine that helps this journey as well. Being nice to your spouses because they can be great sounding boards. Remembering our parents who were great coaches, who really taught us and kept practicing what they preached to us, and which is what we are passing on to the next generation. And then, of course, we all have ways and means of giving back and doing things which also keeps us sane, which is including Bollywood dancing that Shalaka does very well, and giving back to society and community services. So thank you once again. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.